This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. Boris Johnson's stranglehold on British politics is over. An administration built entirely upon lies and the bogus charisma of one of the single most fraudulent individuals ever to inhabit public life in Britain has come to an inevitable and inglorious end. Even sooner, perhaps, than some of us expected or predicted, but no less spectacular than would have always been the case. Because democracy and decency are twins. You can't have one without the other, and you can't have democracy when there is no decency in Downing Street. And there hasn't been any decency in Downing Street since 2019. I spent yesterday's programme looking at the resignations of Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak, and I think in retrospect we were far too kind to them, particularly perhaps to Sajid Javid. The idea that these men and now women have suddenly discovered a taste for decency, a respect for democracy, a reverence for integrity is absolutely outrageous. To have sat there silently while this man rode roughshod over all of our most valued conventions, traditions, standards, while he once again thought it was churlish of us to expect him to abide by the network of obligation that binds us all, is actually breathtaking in its audacity. How bloody dare they? How dare they talk today about the importance of honesty, the relevance of integrity, the necessity of decency? How dare these nodding dogs and political pygmies posture in a way that casts them as having somehow exercised moral judgment after facilitating, championing and cheerleading a singularly disgraceful and despicable episode in British political history. If you are expecting a celebration on this programme today, then I'm sorry. I was too. And yet, as the dust has settled around this complete carnage, I find myself dispirited, dismayed, and angry. There's relief. Of course there's relief. The house is no longer on fire. The arsonist is being driven away in the back of a police van. But the damage that's been done to the country that we love, while these people have tried to cast themselves as patriots, the damage is incalculable and cannot be repaired for generations. Everything is broken. Everything is broken. Broken by the vanity of one man and the cultish dedication to his promotion practiced everywhere from the office of the owner of the Daily Mail right down to the silliest, most deluded voter in the country. It is incredible. Why relief? Because it could have been worse. Yesterday, there were moments when you wondered what the British equivalent of January the 6th would look like. The utter refusal of a man so high on his own self-importance and delusional vanity that he would contemplate anything in protection of his own position. Where would he go next? And thankfully, and I don't think it's something we could take for granted, thankfully, somehow the Conservative Party found not just the means, but the will to slam the brakes upon his ego trip. But there were moments yesterday when I wondered, and you do wonder, of course, how many times have we wondered together over the last few years whether we were the ones that were going mad? But to hear one of Johnson's former bagmen, Will Walden, on at the end of Tom Swarbrick's programme there, talking about how even he feared that we were close to seeing a dismantling of democratic norms. That's how bad it was. Because they would have still cheered. Do you know what the front page of the Daily Mail is today? The owner of the Daily Mail took a decision not long ago to get rid of an editor called Geordie Gregg, who had somehow managed to begin the detoxification of the single most diabolical influence on public life that this country has ever seen. And somehow that editor was managing to turn things around. But the owner took a decision that they were going to go all in on backing Boris Johnson, they were going to bet the house on supporting Boris Johnson, and they were going to get rid of a man who could have changed the face of the British media in a way that is sorely and desperately needed. But they didn't. Do you know what their front page is today? Hold on to your hats. This is supposedly the finest minds on Fleet Street, the best political judgment in our profession. And their front page today, Boris stares down the mutiny. And then page after page after page of praise and paeans to the most corrupt man ever to hold public office in this country. Attacks upon the people that have brought him down, culminating, and you won't believe this, but I've tweeted a picture just to prove it, culminating in a headline that seeks to blame so-called Remainers for Boris Johnson's self-inflicted catastrophe. Crowing Remainiacs is a headline in the Daily Mail today. One of their writers, PMs should be ousted by the people, not a bunch of TV pundits and bureaucrats deranged by Brexit hatred. This was written after the Chancellor of the Exchequer had resigned in disgust, after the Secretary of State for Health had resigned in disgust, after more ministers resigned in a single day under Boris Johnson than had ever resigned under a single Prime Minister in the history of this country. So there will be no celebrations on this programme today, because this is not the beginning of the end. This is the end of the beginning. And what happens next is something that nobody knows. Many, many millions of people aren't ready yet to make the link between Boris Johnson and Brexit, to recognise that the inevitability of this inglorious collapse was written the moment he walked into Downing Street. Written the moment, in many ways, he decided to publish the column calling for a withdrawal from the European Union instead of the one that his genuine instincts led him to, which was the obvious sense and good sense of staying. But my God, spare me the mayor. Well, it's not even mea culpas, is it? Spare me the moral pontifications of people that put him there and until 2:10 yesterday were bending the knee in front of him. 24 hours it took for Nadeem Zahawi to say on national live television that he doesn't think Boris Johnson lies, that he thinks he tells the truth at all times, to sending a letter calling upon him to walk the plank. Let's not beat about the bush. Very, very clever politicking and tactical nous from Nadeem Zahawi, putting himself in the position of being the most powerful politician in government at precisely the moment that the leadership contest begins, as he probably knew it would. But there were moments yesterday when we were not sure. When the abject, crass, tragic self-regard of one man could have wreaked damage upon this country, the like of which we have never seen before. And that's what I mean by saying that we almost, I think, discovered what the British equivalent of January the 6th in America would have looked like. It would have looked very different. They're completely different countries, completely different political systems, completely different constitutions. One of them is written and one of them is not, as you know. But I don't know. If it wasn't for that unending avalanche of resignation and the fact that it started again this morning, I think that's probably even more crucial than what happened yesterday. The fact that it started again this morning, the fact that resignation letters were dropping on the Downing Street doormat before your shredded wheat had even been introduced to their morning milk. It was unsustainable. And it reached a point where even the most delusional and despicable man ever to hold public office in this country could no longer keep reality at bay. But my God, he tried. House of Commons yesterday, he meant it. Even when he stood before a select committee and accidentally revealed that he really did meet with a former KGB colonel hours after a NATO meeting and without his security detail. Something that Dominic Raab described as complete nonsense when asked a question by a Labour MP not long ago about precisely those facts which emerged yesterday. The chaos with which he deliberately operates. It's not like an accident or a price worth paying for the occasional brilliance. It's everything that he is corrupt and chaotic. Everything that he does is corrupt and chaotic. Everything he has ever been is corrupt and chaotic. So proper patriots, people who actually love this country, people who actually hate what has been and is being done to it, we don't get to celebrate today, I don't think. We don't even get to take 3 hours off, I don't think. Because the flames may have been extinguished, but the house is a burnt-out wreck. It's a charred shell. It's a broken frame. And I don't know where the repairs start. I don't know what the repairs look like, and I don't even believe that the repairs can begin in good faith until the other big lie is acknowledged. And there is not much chance of that happening anytime soon, because once this dreadful leadership battle gets underway, someone beautifully described yesterday the idea of choosing the next Conservative leader as being like choosing which rancid toilet to go to at the Glastonbury Festival. But when this gets underway, then we're back with the bloody B word, I'm afraid. We're back with the newspapers clinging to the cultish carcass of this ridiculous project. And the leadership candidate who seems most likely to keep the balloon of nonsense inflated will be anointed by the facilitators, will be hosed down by the client journalists like the ludicrous political editor of The Sun and similarly absurd individuals in journalism. They'll all begin the process of pretending none of this ever happened, and Johnson is just a distant memory in our rearview mirror, and moving forward all the same priorities will return to the forefront of public discourse, and the madness will begin again, albeit with a considerably less corrupt ringleader. The circus will be every bit as bonkers. And some of us will sit here wondering what the hell has happened. Some of us will present radio shows every day wondering what the hell has happened. How was this permitted to unfold? How were we allowed to allow this sort of poison, this toxicity into public discourse? Never mind politics, never mind Downing Street. The fire is out. But the house is a charred wreck. I don't know what happens next, and you don't know what happens next. But it's a phone-in show, so we should talk to each other. And the number you need to do that is 0345 6060 973. 2 lines of inquiry, perhaps, although this is one of those mornings where I think we can almost treat each other as each other's therapists. Just ring and chat. Ring and talk. I don't particularly want to hear from many of the public figures. There's a few I'd talk to. I'd like to hear, for example, what Rory Stewart has to say. I was very interested to hear what Andrew Marr had to say. But this isn't a programme where there's a gap that needs filling, so we'll book the What's It editor of the Daily Bugle and talk. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. I want to listen to you. I want to know what you think about what's happened to us, what's happened to our country, what continues to unfold and unravel. And I want to know what it feels like today to finally see clearly what you've been part of, what you have facilitated. There was one reason and one reason only to vote for Boris Johnson in 2019. He wasn't Jeremy Corbyn. I get that. I get that completely. I voted Labour, but I did so knowing that the Labour leader was about to hand an absolutely enormous majority, gift-wrapped with a big pink bow, to a man who would indubitably prove to be the worst Prime Minister this country has ever seen. I thought the unravelling would take a little longer. I thought that the unveiling of his true self would happen in an incremental fashion. And I worried that when the end came, it wouldn't do justice to the awfulness of the man. I worried that he might slime away, that he might slither out of public office, that history might somehow let him and his facilitators off the hook and posterity would give him a pass. I worried, actually, that the end would not measure up to the middle. But my God, this is an end that could only have happened to someone as unutterably awful as Boris Johnson. The end is every bit as bad and base and gross as his premiership and his character. Unbelievable to imagine that the end could actually live up to the life. And it has. It's over. Boris Johnson is done. He is finished. He is an ex-Prime Minister. But our country, our beloved country, it's going to be living with the legacy of his awfulness for the rest of our lives.